MSME lending. We have a dynamic panel, which I am going to introduce in a minute. But before I do that, I want each and every one of us to pay close attention to these panel members, because they have a wealth of experience which they're bringing to bear, which I believe sincerely will change the hearts and minds of how we conceptualize capacity building on the one hand and accessing finance on the other. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the following panel member. We have Mrs. Nwamaka Onyike. She's a certified performance coach and author, international facilitator, SMIDAN business consultant, and talent management strategist. Her experience spans over 29 years across national and multinational corporates in multiple sectors, including 10 years in Ford Motor Company in the UK. She is currently the founder CEO of Protege Professionals, a firm aimed at helping MSMEs build robust structures and improve the quality of their businesses and workforce through strategic consultation and interventions, training, mentoring, and coaching. Nwamaka has a master's degree in human resource development from Middlesex University in the UK and a diploma in performance coaching from the UK College of Life Coaching, now Coaching Academy. Our second panel member, Mrs. Idiamaka Ukwanu, is a career banker with experience spanning over 20 years across Nigeria at Guarantee Trust Bank. Her career commenced in Lagos and evolved into leadership, including as the bank's divisional head for retail banking, Abuja and North Central states, following a long run as head construction and oil gas in the North. To be sure, she has a first degree in agricultural economics from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, successfully completed an MBA with the Edinburgh Business School, and of course, she became a chartered accountant, ACCA, Member Institute of Credit Administration, and the list goes on. Our next panel member, our very own Dr. Oladimeji Alo, who serves as an independent director here at the Development Bank of Nigeria, but also as a director at ARM Life PLC. He has served as the managing director and chief executive officer of FITC, where he contributed actively in a series of reforms in the Nigerian banking sector over the past 13 years. Now, to be sure, he has extensive experience in providing consulting for numerous organizations. He had a stint with PricewaterhouseCoopers. He also is a non-executive director on the board of Burger Paint. And also, let's not forget, he's a scholar, a management consultant, a corporate government enthusiast, and has a bachelor's degree in social sciences, master's degree in industrial sociology, and a doctor of philosophy or PhD in industrial sociology from the University of Ile-Ife here in Nigeria. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Monday Ewans, who is representing the DG of SMIDAM, Dr. Diko Rada, who couldn't be here with us today. But Mr. Monday Ewans is currently the Director of Enterprise Development and Promotion at the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria. That's the federal government's agency responsible for coordinating and facilitating the development of the MSMEs subsector in Nigeria. Mr. Evans has a wealth of experience spanning over 25 years. He has a master's degree in banking and finance from Abbey State University and a Bachelor of Science degrees with honors in economics from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. I would like to welcome each and every panelist to the program today. And I am your very own Professor Joseph Nana, the Chief Economist of the Development Bank of Nigeria, serving as your moderator. So without further ado, I would just rather jump right into the discourse, because right now we are about to change the hearts and minds of the banking space. So we already know the role capacity building plays in any business enterprise, in any industry, in any sector. However, what we've also seen is a plethora of trainings all across Nigeria. However, MSMEs still don't have the requisite skill set on the one hand to access finance. So this medium is trying, or aimed rather, to basically ensure that the MSMEs have a better idea of what bankers require on the one hand, but also perhaps the training methodologies, the capacity building platforms that may exist to ensure it is a quality training that's ongoing, to ensure that they have all the readiness and all the materials they will require to access finance to any bank in Nigeria. So I don't want to talk too much on this subject matter because we have a panel that is primed with information that's going to share with each and every one of us today. So without further delay, let me start with Nwamaka. Nwamaka, please, can you please share with us what you have seen over your time in the consulting space on the challenges within the context of capacity building, of course, facing MSMEs in Nigeria? Over to you. Please unmute your mic.
That will help.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Okay, so is this the part where I share my slides and have 10 minutes, or is this just a question?
Please, this is the part you share slides and you have 10 minutes.
Right, thank you. Morning, everyone. And thank you to DBN for this great opportunity to speak to a host of SMEs, MSMEs, and other providers in this space. So it's always a privilege. Okay, so just very quickly, looking at numbers when we talk about challenges, it's important to kind of look at the numbers we have when we look at that space, and we're looking at over 41 million of MSMEs, and that was from the PwC survey of 2020, which is so very recent. And that accounts, for 96% of the businesses in Nigeria, contributing 50% to our GDP. So there's a huge, huge, huge space here, and capacity building is required. So I've been working in this space for many years, and the issue of capacity building is a very passionate one to me because that's where I am. So now what's the challenge, like Professor Joseph asked? And the big issue is that as much as capacity building is an enabling process for SMEs, on showing them how to do things differently, capacity building is more than training, okay? And he stressed in what he said that there's so many capacity buildings going on. And it'll be interesting to know, how, their framework is shaped. Is it just about training? Is there advisory? Are they technical experts, coaching, all sorts of things? Because, when you talk about capacity building, there's a bit more that I've found that the MSMEs need. Because when you go on site, which I've had the privilege of doing a lot of times after training, where you give them the information and then you go in as a consultant, you find out that there's a big difference between knowing and doing, okay? So what I find is that they're taking all this information and it's overwhelming. And they get back to their spaces and the doing becomes a problem. And there are many reasons for that. So let's just go through a few of that. So there are 3 dimensions I find of capacity building. There's the individual, which is usually the CEO or the provider. There's the organization that they work in. So that context you have to look at as well. So do they have able people? Do they have the enabling environment, the people that can carry on? Because they can't implement these things themselves. And so the question is, do they have the people within the organization to do it? And my answer to that, I can do it up front just so that my 10 minutes doesn't run out, is no. A lot of times, 90% of the time, the answer is no. Then the enabling environments, which is the space, the external environment they work in. How do the policies and the kind of legal issues that exist, and the environmental issues, how does that affect? I mean, we don't have to look too far. We've seen the impact of COVID. So it doesn't matter what capacity building you've done, if it has not addressed how to continue a business, when you have an environmental issue, there's a problem. So I'll give you an example. So forget COVID. There was a kind of capacity building we did. And, like I said, there are different kinds. And the one I refer to is one of the projects I work with EDC on. I'm a consultant with EDC with their MSMEs, and it's called the Oxfam Project. So it's a really brilliant program because the capacity building is not just about the training, but it's about the consulting. So after their training, we go in and consult with them for 6 months, and from different disciplines, the marketing, the HR, the fund, finance, so they get the hands-on. Then they get the coaching, the mentoring, and then we train their staff. So because we understand that it's not just the business, it's the people. So this example I'm going to share with you is because I go all over Nigeria. So on one of my visits, I had to go to Kaduna. That was last year, to then do the consultation with the SME. And on, getting there with all the things taken away from the classroom in trying to understand, okay, what have you implemented? The issue is that even to get to Kaduna was a problem because they went through, they had an issue on unrest. There's always an unrest. I worked there for 2 years. So I know the bombings, all the things that go on. And so she gets back and the issue, they were shut down. So I couldn't even go for 2 weeks. And when I did go, I had to see 2 SMEs. The question was, one of them was able to perform, the other wasn't. And that was due to the location. And these are the enabling environments we talk about. Where she was located prevented her from, in fact, carrying on her business. She really had to shut down her farm because the unrest, was in that area. Now the other SME, because again, in Kaduna, it depends on where you live, north or south. Her business was a bakery, and she was able to function because her customers would come and buy bread, they needed to eat. And she created a situation where her staff, they couldn't get home, so they had to live with her because her house was also in the premises of the bakery. So that was brilliant. And coming now to see whatever you've learned in the classroom, if you didn't address business continuity, they don't know how to implement business continuity. So the strategy had to be about, okay, so some of these things you learned in the classroom cannot work in this environment. And so we started to look at our business continuity strategy. She just acquired a land. And then I said, the important thing is that your business is thriving and continuing because of where you're located. This land you've got, if there's another unrest, which is frequent, how are you going to be able to serve these customers that are walking to you because of your location? And so that now became a big issue because she now realized that even though they were still in the same area, access to customers was going to be a problem. So we created a business continuity strategy, which addressed the fact that have this location as a secondary location. So don't close down this location. So if anything happens to the main factory, you still have this site to use. And then of course, stock, raw materials, you had to implement it. So she had 2 weeks to 1 month raw materials at all times. So it's things like that that you find that are not within the context of sometimes the things we do in the classroom. And if she didn't get an expert consultant going in, then how do they know these things? So these are some of the challenges they face. Okay, so now again, is to also understand that there are 4 stages of SME transitions. They start as an entrepreneur, and the idea is to get them to establish. But at each level, they are different. So if you have all these different levels of people in your classroom, it's not one size fits all. There are different things they're going to be needing. So we can't speak to them from one sheet. So again, like I said, they require, at the very early stages, the things they require are very different. Structures, their challenges are different. So we have to be able to diagnose them, which is what I find. So, and this now speaks to the consultants. So do we have adequately trained consultants that can do this proper diagnosis? And this is where people like EDC, which is the Enterprise Development Center, Smidden, who's developed a great framework, to train these partners. And then capacity building with difference. Now, very quickly, just looking at the levels, I'm not going to go too much into it so I don't use up all my time. Like I said, organizational strengthening support, and when it relates to the capacity building we do, has to be at different levels because we have the foundational level. At this level, when you're giving capacity building to a micro organization, what you'll find is no clue about structures, compliance issues, no, tax, payee, you find no financial records. In fact, there was I did another project with the Sheriff Blair, which is about financial literacy, where I had to mentor 50 women last year. On that program, out of those 50 women, maybe only 5 had understood not paying in their business money into private accounts. So simple as saying to them that separate your accounts, let your business accounts, all money is going, is at the level we're talking about. So we're not even talking about their financial statements now and having the right documentation. So there's very foundational issues at this level. But when you come to the emerging enterprises, you find they need more direct help. They have daily issues, and this is where structures have to be boosted up. They need leadership development. They need staff development as well, and making sure they have the core staff that can support the leader. And then we have organization at the more established organization, more complex help is required. There's strategies, structures, and even sometimes we have to go at this stage back to foundation to them to strengthen some things, because sometimes along the way they forget what has kept them and they leave those functions, and we have to take them back and say, no, level one must never end. You must, So, okay, just very quickly, just looking at the importance, structures, capacity building is really helping SMEs understand structures, access to finance issues, helping them scale and strengthening. The benefits I've seen are things like, helping them build structures, understand their business model canvas better, leadership development, sometimes staff development when it depends on the program. Some providers, capacity builders carry some staff along in this training. And then better utilization of their resources and finding in-house. Sometimes you find they don't need a loan. They have the money in-house. They just don't know how to get it out. So again, helping them with that. The challenge is rounding up with this so that I don't use up my time. For SMS, you find that there's mismatch of skill sets. Different people at different levels, okay? So again, they take away different things. Some people, when they go away and you speak with them later, you find out that just maybe 4 months, 3 months, they know nothing. They can't implement these things we talk about. The no investors, they're doing poor implementation. That's another thing that we need to look at as an opportunity, that how do we help implement what we're building with them? And then leadership hoarding of knowledge. They don't, again, it's getting them to understand that what they have in their head needs to be a standard operating procedure. And they hoard this because they don't want people stealing their ideas, so they think. So again, that's the education around that kind of making them understand the role of processes and not hoarding this information. And then poor delegation, they don't have the staff to implement these things for them. Then determining the right funds. Not all of them need a bank loan. It's just helping them decide, is it a loan? Is it a grant? Is it a family? Because I'll give you another example. I had a situation with an example with a school. They took a loan, which meant monthly payments. The problem with that was they're termly. And so when they go on holiday, she struggled to pay this loan. So giving them this financial literacy helps them understand the type of loan and how to structure it with even the banks when they go for it. Again, we need, challenges, more trained, better trained consultants. And for the providers, sometimes lending is too complicated, rates are high, and product awareness of staff. So even the staff, I had a situation where we brought in some banks to speak to like these 50 women. And one of the banks had a brilliant product. And after they had shared this product, somebody in the audience, got up and said, look, I tried this product. I loved it. I loved when I heard about it. I took the form. I went back to Benin, I went to the bank there, and nobody knew they couldn't help me. Because again, the training of the breadth of staff you carry along with the product awareness is very important, because these SMEs are in different locations. If your banks don't understand it, then they can't help. I hope this is helping, Professor Joseph.
Please, Wamaka, you've said a lot. Thank you so much for your input so far. I want to pass it over to Dr. Alo right now, because I know he has a lot of things he wants to unpack from what you've said and provide insight in terms of case studies that he has actually been on the ground experiencing these things. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. First, I believe that we need to dimension the discussion in order to be able to capture the different elements of it. I see capacity building at 3 different levels when it comes to using it as a tool for increased lending to MSMEs. The first level is the level of the financial institutions. The financial institutions who are the intermediaries need to be trained, not just trained, need their own capacity developed in order to be able to serve that sector better. So that's the first level. The second level is the level of the entrepreneurs. In addressing that level, we need to also understand that we have different subsets, the micro, the small, and the medium. And as Wamaka said, the needs of the different sectors often differ depending on where they are in the scale of their involvement as an enterprise. The third level we must bear in mind is the level of the development partners and the regulatory authorities that are playing a very major role in helping SMEs. I'm referring, for instance, to CBN, who has played a big role in helping to develop several sectors of Nigerian economy. So capacity building must apply at those three levels. Now, let's talk about the financial institutions. Many of them sometimes are frustrated that they have the fund to lend. They are interested in lending. They can't understand why these MSMEs are not coming forward. And when they come forward, they're totally unprepared. One of the things they need to know is the special nature of SMEs and the fact that lending to that sector is not plug and play. The banks, in particular, the commercial banks and merchant banks, do very well when they deal with very highly structured organizations. They ask the right questions, they fill the right forms, things are done. But when they deal with MSMEs, there's a level of frustration that they find because the very basic things are not there. So there's a need to build the capacity of financial institutions to understand the special needs of that sector. Beyond that also, if it were possible for bankers or departments of banks lending to SMEs to engage and recruit individuals who have been entrepreneurs before, so that they can understand the psyche and the challenges of those entrepreneurs. But of course, what do we have? Many of those who work in those departments are people who are bankers in the ordinary sense of the word, who are trained as commercial bankers in the ordinary sense of the word, so they cannot feel what their customers are feeling. So part of the capacity building would therefore be that some arrangement of immersion, some arrangement of tutorship is done, that those who work in the desk of FMEs in those banks have some training or some affiliation with those they are seeking to serve. Now let's talk about the entrepreneurs themselves. Oftentimes when we talk about access to finance or increased lending, we make this mistake of thinking that what these enterprises need is lending. And I'm glad Wamaka made that point. It is not all the time that it is lending or it's capital that they require. There are a whole range of things that they require, which institutions, financial institutions could help with, which development partners could help with. I'm sure you know this very well. That some of them cannot even keep basic books of accounts. Some of them are harassed daily by tax authorities, local government authorities, state government authorities, one license, one signboard. These are things that distract them. And these are things sometimes that make them do those things that make them unattractive to banks to work with. We'll come to that later on. And so the question you must understand is, how do we build the capacity to deal with those challenges? For instance, I know in some clients, some banks assist SMEs to get cheap and simple softwares for holding their, for building their financial statements, so that it costs little less to nothing. The guy pays something, the bank supplements. Of course, the bank is not a charity. Whatever it is supplementing, it can always get back from its involvement with the enterprise, so that they're able to build their books, they're able to keep their transactions, and it is easier for the banks to work with them. One of the things you will notice is that part of the challenge banks face in dealing with this sector is that they don't have, the sectors, they don't have records. Many of them mix their business money with their official money. Many of them don't even want to go to the banks because they believe that charges. They don't understand why this should be, is that I keep my money with you, you are charging me for keeping my money with you. They don't understand the whole concept around the fact that the banks also have overheads and they have a need to make money to remain in business. So there's a lot to be done to ensure that they are also educated, that the little charges you pay, the little things you pay, you get far more than that in the support you receive from the banks. You get far more than that when the banks now avail you facilities that enables you to expand your business and grow. Another area that we must bear in mind is also about production capacity. For some of them who are in cottage industry and all of that, they need support in improving the technology. They need support in expanding their businesses. You may ask the question, oh, what's the bank doing about someone who wants to improve? But of course, the bank can assist. Michael also spoke about the EDCs that exist. Some of them focus in the area of production, helping to build capacity. Things like marketing, assisting them. I know a bank in Nigeria in the last 6 or 7 years, I won't mention its name now, that organizes a fair, a trade fair every year for small businesses in a particular sector, where people come in and display their wares, they have an exhibition. That bank, for instance, spend a lot of money doing it, but I'm sure it must have a way of recouping its money from businesses it gets from those entrepreneurs. And when those companies grow, they will remember the companies, the banks that support them. So these are ways. Let me talk about the development partners and the regulatory authorities who are playing a major role in this. One thing I think they can do, in my view, from little experience I have, they could help in the alignment, or if you like, the coordination of the different efforts that we have at different levels. What I see happening oftentimes is that the federal government is doing a lot, either through CBN or other agencies, but the other subnationalities are not keying in. Oftentimes, they are doing things that contradict the direction and the objectives of federal government and its agencies. Not because they're malicious, but because there is nobody aligning what is being done. And so it is important, for instance, we're talking about ease of doing business, even for MSMEs. We have this beautiful regulation now that is saying you can do a lot of things in a short while. The question is, have we looked at other things that contradict these beautiful policies of government that are happening at the subnational levels? So let me just pause at that level so that I notice that my time is going up. But essentially, we need to have a coordinated effort. Understand we are dealing with different levels. We are dealing with different categories of operators who are different levels in the development agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alo. I can tell you your points are well noted and well received. And this is a brilliant segue to speak with our resident banker in the house here, Ndidi. Please, in your response as you unpack and take a deeper dive into the discourse, if you could please put this in perspective. Do you feel, in terms of access to finance from a banker's perspective, of course, is the industry ready to place greater emphasis on capacity building in terms of access and finance? What are your thoughts on that? Please unpack that for us.
Okay, one thing that has not been well canvassed is something called enlightened self-interest. It is in the enlightened self-interest of the financial institutions to develop the capacity of MSMEs. Because when you develop their capacity and they grow and they do better, first, not only that way do they create employment, help the economy to grow, then we have bigger businesses for the banks and financial institutions to deal with. So, whatever you do to support MSMEs, to build their capacity, to help them lift from that basis to grow, you are doing it for yourself in the future. In other words, it is in the enlightened self-interest of the financial institutions to invest in capacity building for SMEs, not just in terms of the national agenda that the growth of SMEs would serve, but in terms of the fact that they create a base, a bigger base of customers, because it's a life history. Every business starts at a basis, then it grows. So every business that is growing, that business more often than not will remember you as the partner that assisted you to get to that point.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your response. Ndidi, can you please react to that comment and the question I originally posed?
Thank you very much. It's been an interesting session already. Very exciting, actually. Dr. Alon, so, I mean, really, the banks are profit enterprises. So sometimes you're caught in between thinking long term, thinking short term. Your approach is very, but you know, we must keep both perspectives in view at every point in time. So it's actually a base that currently interests the banks. And I dare say that the banks are making a lot of efforts to build capacity, but maybe not like Wamaka, where there are direct trainings. There are direct trainings happening, but maybe not at the scale Wamaka will be able to deal with them one-on-one. The first thing I want to say is that banks make money from lending money. Banks make money from lending money. I think a lot of people often miss out on. The real issue for the banks is the risk profile in the lending transaction or with the said SME, the said individual behind that MSME. So you want to make sure that if I give
It seems we have okay.
First, I have to be.
No, your line,
Can you hear me?
it broke up for a bit, but continue. Go ahead.
Okay. So first, we have to be able, before we think about making money from the money, because after all, the funds that we're lending out really do not mostly belong to us.
Yeah.
But we do make money from lending money. So it is in our own interest, this really huge sector of the economy, but risk is the factor. And I think Wamaka has spoken excellently when she dimensioned the risk really as it arises from this and so many other things. So I would just say, how do banks then assess this risk? We go back to the preliminaries. It's the 5 C's of credit. But the primary thing is character. A lot of people don't realize how much the banks look at that subject of character. And when we're talking character, we're not just talking integrity, we're also talking discipline. Individual, and it shows up in their ability to manage set structures. I mean, Wamaka was so spot on when she spoke about it's not in teaching them, for them to operationalize these things that they are taught. It's actually a big, most of the SMEs do not even see that I, as an individual, I am different from my business. And being able to just separate those two entities appears to be a huge struggle for them. And when you see that, that becomes a problem for the banks. So character really for the banks is a huge issue. There's capacity, conditions, capital, which we're talking about today. And a lot of people don't realize that collateral, if we don't satisfy the first 4, then there is no discussion about collateral. Because what you want to see is that you can pay back. We're not real estate agents. That's not our primary function. Out and dispose of collateral. Collateral is just a fallback position. But going into the future, I think one of the things that we should be doing in the way we build capacity or train SMEs is to look at the transition that is traditional banking to banking that is leveraging technology, the incursion of the fintechs. So all of these things will begin to run on data. Already, if you look at a lot of the banks, and my bank in particular, quick credit for business, we have fashion credit, we have food credit. The thing with all of these facilities or loans is that there is almost zero human interface in accessing them. Access based on the story that your data is telling us about you. So this is the future. Because if we look at the odd 6,000 branches, if you put all the banks together, when you look at the 6,000 branches,
I think there's a break in transmission
so
once
we
again.
must, hello, can you hear me now? So sorry,
Please
I don't know.
go ahead. Go ahead. There's a break in transmission, but please proceed.
Okay, so technology deal and technology is feeding off on data. So structure has become more important than before because the data that we are getting and the algorithms that we are applying decide, is this a good sector? Is this a good individual? Is this a good business to lend to? So, we need to start to be for the future. Now, I'm taking the future, going deeper into the future, is that we're going to be seeing a lot of aggregation. That already has commenced. So we have the BVN number, so there's no more hiding place. You have tax, you have NIN. Sooner than later, we're going to see these platforms merge. The utilities will plug in. Are the MSMEs then ready? Because all of those things will broaden the story that about the business. So structure is more important now than ever before. How you make payments, how you receive payments. The data will tell us, do you have a concentration risk when it comes to how the social media of things, let me call it that, is telling stories about you, how your customers interact with you. So this really, people, I think we all say is the future, but I think it's already here. And that is something need to be prepared for. Lending is going to be data-driven. Human interface is significantly being eliminated. What is your data saying about you? So it will not be one man who likes your face or does not like the manager. I don't know the manager. Banking has moved on from there. So we want to go down finally for me to the financial literacy that they don't have.
That's a very good point.
How they run their businesses. So everybody believes I need money, I need to go to the banks. MSMEs have a need to understand that to be provided by the banks. I sometimes joke with my customers and I say, interest rate does not know a weekend, a public holiday, a strike, a lockdown. It really doesn't know those things. So when you business, if it's a startup, you're not yet steady, which means that you cannot see the steady cash flow or the logical flow of the business, then you want friends and family. You want to raise equity, which largely brings me back to character. You are selling yourself. Do the people believe in you? Do they believe in the idea that you're selling? It is not at that time a bank because the interest rate is not going to be listening for when there is an interjection that you didn't prepare for in your business, which is bound to happen. So when you get to the stage where and you're seeking working capital to keep business running, or you're seeking expansion based on existing cash flows, then is the time to come to the banks. So it is an area where people need competence in knowing when to borrow. Then a lot of the rejection is actually scaled down. Dr. Allah spoke to bank preparedness. I think the banks are getting more prepared.
Once
the
again, we have a
separate
breaking transmission.
divisions spread out. Yeah, okay, I should be back on now.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the SMEs are specialized in the bank. For GT Bank, they are specialized desks. They are spread across the country. The banks are doing fairs. We have the food fair and the fashion fair. And people just think, oh, you know, the food fair and the fashion fair, oh, we just buy and sell. For us, it is way beyond that.
Yeah.
We want to create the atmosphere for interaction to happen amongst people in the MSME market, among people, give them access to market, very big names, even internationally, so that they can come and sample their goods. We open the doors of export for them. They meet each other, they share ideas, they share learning points. That is the idea of those fairs. It's really not about during that weekend period. We're hoping that we have triggered relationships that will benefit them well into the future, and they will leverage each other to continue to grow. So that's something the banks are doing. The banks are technology and the basis for efficient lending and for the MSMEs to also scale. The banks are presenting platforms. We have a platform called Habari, so that people can get on those platforms, continue to sell, which means that you're going asset light, you're projecting yourself, you don't need to build your own platform. So the banks are more ready than I think people know. And we are so desperate, because like Dr. Alo rightly said, this is such an exciting market for the banks. But you know, we need to balance that out with risk. But I'm sure in these conversations, we will be moving forward on a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your input and insights to this conversation, Ndidi. Very well said. Last but certainly not least, I would like to bring in now Mr. Monday Ewans to share with us some of his insights where he sits as a director at Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, what his organization or agency rather has done in the aspect of capacity building on the one hand, but also assisting MSMEs to gain access to credit on the other. Please, Monday, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. I'm happy to be on this platform this morning, though I'm representing my DG who had to step out suddenly because he had a meeting with our minister. But I'm happy to be with this platform because at the SMEDAN, the agency, access to finance has been a key problem for MSMEs that we deal with. In fact, if you talk to any single small business owner, they will tell you that the key challenge is access to finance. But from our interactions over time, we know that access to finance is not a standalone challenge. You have to talk about skills, which is a capacity building. You also need to talk about off-taking arrangement, the market. Once you are able to combine these three, then you can be sure that you are a successful entrepreneur. So capacity building, skills, access to finance and markets is key to what we're talking about. And of course, SMEDAN, as we all know, is the key agency of government for support the MSME subsector in Nigeria. And of course, we do that on several platforms in terms of providing information, in terms of delivery of business development service, which includes capacity building, mentoring, counseling, and the rest. We also encourage networking and clustering. We also do policy and public advocacy on behalf of small businesses, wherever they may be, because as a government institution, some of these small businesses do not have direct access to other government agencies. So we help them to support them in terms of maybe registration of businesses with CAC, payment of taxes with FIRS, registration of products with SON or NAFDAC and the rest. And of course, we also facilitate access to critical resources they use in running their businesses, like finance we're talking about today, like equipment, like a workspace, and the rest. Of course, the issue we're talking about today is about MSME, so we need to put it in the correct perspective. Of course, Nwamaka talked about the 41.5 million MSMEs. Of course, This was the survey SMEDAN carried out with the National Bureau of Statistics as at 31st December 2017 and was published in 2019, made public 2019. We discovered that there are about 41.5 million MSMEs across the country. And of course, out of this 41.5 million, about 41.4 million of them, about 99.8%, are strictly micro enterprises. And these micro enterprises are essentially those enterprises that employ between one person and less than 10 persons, and also have a sales base of between one naira and less than 10 million naira. And of course, in the majority, these micro enterprises are largely informal. Just a little percentage, less than 10%, can boast of being a formal. So most of them are largely informal. And of course, it also has something to do with the ability to access formal finance. I mean, if you are not a formal institution, have a corporate governance and so on, you cannot access formal finance. So it's an issue that we're also handling at the agency level to make sure that there is a migration, there's transition from micro enterprises to small, to medium, and to large, so that they'll be in a position to access formal finance, because it is key. If you don't access formal finance, you might not be able to be in a position to scale your business and improve your business to what you're doing. And of course, from that survey, we also discovered that this 41.5 million MSMEs employ about 59.6 million persons, which is about 76.5% of the Nigerian labor force. Of course, these MSMEs also contribute to about 49.78 to nominal GDP as at that date, and also 7.64% to exports as at that date. So this statistics is quite staggering. And then for us to really understand this MSME subsector, we need to understand these statistics. And of course, what we are doing right now is also to make sure that we have a credible database, because the survey is a little bit different from census. So survey is your random sampling, so we might not be able to have this exact statistics, exact numbers, where they are, what they are doing at any point in time. So right now we're doing something like a census to capture these MSMEs, local government by local government, street by street, state by state, to make sure that we can complement the national survey. And that is what we're doing through what we call the MSMEs Mass Registration Project, which is ongoing right now. And of course, we encourage all MSMEs to register right now, because most of the government interventions, people who are going to be the beneficiaries must give us and tender their unique SMEDAN registration number, because once you register, you're given a number. And then how do you do that? We encourage people to launch onto the website www.smedan.register.ng, www.smedanregister.ng. Once you log onto this website, you'll be able to register, and you're given a certificate indicating your SMEDAN unique number. Then going to the issue of challenges being faced by MSMEs in terms of capacity building. Well, the first issue, because we've been handling MSMEs over time, the first issue is the access to capacity building. Having access to capacity building is key in terms of the cost, in terms of whatever it takes to access capacity building. Because most of the trainers, institutions providing capacity building, the fees they charge per unit is quite exorbitant. Of course, remember that I said 41.4 million are micro enterprises, people who operate at the bottom of the pyramid. They don't have the resources to really pay for these services. Of course, from my own experience, whenever we train people, especially at the micro enterprises, we support them with subsidies. We support them, for instance, give them transport fees to the training venue, give them refreshment, and then they don't pay for the training, because we know that they don't have the resources to pay. And that is the way the government is supporting them to grow their business, to be able to have access to capacity building, to be able to grow their businesses. So access to capacity building is key to them. The cost is quite exorbitant. We're encouraging trainers, though they need to make profit because they're in the private sector, to think about adjusting their costs in order to accommodate small businesses. And of course, the other issue about the quality of capacity building is also key, because most of the trainers around are not qualified to be trainers. So if they're not qualified to be trainers, what value do you give to small businesses? Because you cannot give what you don't have. So trainers, the quality of training is also key, because if you don't get the kind of training experience you deserve, you cannot even translate it to a simple keeping of records, a simple development of a bankable business plan, not to talk of defending it before a financier to be able to have access to funding. Of course, that is why we're concerned about who are expected to be trainers, or what we call BDSPs in Nigeria. And then on that platform, what we're doing is to, in fact, we have already established what we call the National BDSPs Certification and Accreditation Framework. What do we mean by that? BDSPs are consultants that provide capacity building for small businesses. And then we're saying, before you will be licensed to be a BDSP, before you are licensed to deliver capacity building to small businesses, you must go through a series of qualifying processes. For instance, you need to undergo a training program that will prove that you are able to have the quality, you have the experience, you have the capacity to be able to deliver service. Then when you go through the training and qualify, of course, you're writing exams at the end of the training. Then from there, the next level is to face the National Steering Committee, which is the highest body on that framework, which will now review the report of the exam and also review your portfolio of intervention in the MSME subsector. Portfolio, we mean, is that you need to prove to us that you've been able to support small businesses over time in terms of maybe training, in terms of access to finance, in terms of access to equipment and other resources for you to be able to be given access to practice.
Monday, you are on a roll, sir, but let me take a pause for a second and ask you a question. Do you feel there's a disconnect between the so-called trainer certification and access in finance, the banker's perspective, or not? Because it seems like if there's a national body to certify trainers on the one hand, and these MSME participants go through said training, my question is, are the financiers appraised or aware of those trainings? And can they key into that as some sort of certification that, okay, this is the standard of trainings and this can now feed as part of the credit appraisal process? I would like Ndidi's take on this, if she's seen any documentation of said certification across her desk. I don't know.
Okay. So can I go on?
Please respond and Ndidi will follow up.
All right. Okay, all right. We realize that the banks are the key people in this subsector, because they need to lend to small businesses. They need to lend, because if they don't lend, they don't grow the real sector. And of course, for them to lend, they need to understand what the MSMEs have and what they expect the MSMEs to have. So our first point of call was also during the validation process to invite the banks to the validation process, for them to understand what we're doing, and then for them to translate what we're doing to the services they provide to small businesses. So the banks are aware of the processes, and we expect them to really understand it and take it the way it's supposed to be. And of course, what we're saying is this: for small businesses, the capacity building and the access to finance, it has a direct relationship, like I said before. Of course, for you to go through a capacity building program, you also need to be told that you need to have a strict corporate governance. You need to institute a strict corporate governance within your institution. You also need to have the ability to develop and deploy a bankable business plan that any financier will be interested in and be able to give you support as time goes on. And of course, through the capacity building, you'll be able to be told the strategies to make your business profitable and sustainable. And these are the things the bankers will be interested in, because once you're able to make profit and be sustainable, whenever they give money to you, you'll be able to pay it back to them, because that's the key consideration for banks. And of course, issues related to character and so on, as Ndidi said before, is also part of the thing. And of course, once you go through a relevant capacity building program, you're able to also to have the skills to manage resources that comes into you, whether it's human or material resources. And of course, most importantly, you're able to have the character, you're able to have the capacity to pay back the loans as and when due, not to be chased around by banks to get back their money and so on and so forth, thereby discouraging banks from lending to small businesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your point. Indeed, your comment or reaction to his statements?
anything that improves the process is welcome. But I'll be really honest with you. The banks have transited like Nigeria. Several years, so many, the certificate meant a lot. Today, people are looking for practical skill sets. The fact that you presented a certificate, we're looking beyond those certificates or what you claim that you're learning. What is ultimately happening in the country, if you ask me, is that certain organizations are beginning to distinguish themselves, because when you see their alumni who show themselves up, whether it's a short-term training or it's a long-term training, they distinguish themselves because they are able to apply the learning. So the learning process in those organizations have been so practical. So the banks are looking beyond the fact that a certificate is presented, but what has the individual actually onboarded? Now, we will start to focus on certificates when we are seeing consistently with that certificate is really translating to actual business impact. Then we will take the certificate as business impact. But before then, we are focused on this fact that the people are bringing to business.
But let me ask this question though, because I get the sense that their certificate, for example, call me naive for a second. I went to college, university, get a degree. I have no job experience, but I'm looking to gain that experience. How do I get that experience? Are you working with me? So from an entrepreneur's perspective now, they've gone to their family, friends, and so on, raised some capital to start their small business. But now they've determined, I've reached a space where I can grow given the small finance I have. Consequently, prompting me to go to a bank. I have this certificate from Smidan, as the case may be, and my college diplomas, as the case may be. Now, I've already shown you 2 years of operating activities. By and large, it may not be, the profits may be small, but I've shown you practical experience that I can do this. I have the certificate on hand. Are you saying banks are not still willing to take this on board? Because, I mean, in the end, everybody started from somewhere. Remember now, when you started your career, you were looking for an opportunity to start your career. And if you have zero experience, most companies would say you're not qualified. But how do you get qualification if you don't get some experience? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Your reaction, Ndidi?
It's really the classic chicken or the egg scenario, to be honest. But I'll tell you this, we're looking at everything. It still brings me right back to character, okay?
Okay.
So let me default and point to you that the Igbo traders who go through an entrepreneurship process of learning, who don't have a certificate, some of them come to the you get loans. So it's not so much tied to the certificate, but what we're seeing on ground. Even for the small businesses who have gone through formal training, I want to see hunger. I want to see that the job behind the business is making the right moves. Beyond formal training, he's doing formal training, he's seeking out mentorship, he's making some good efforts. Those things are critically important. So to say to you, none of the information that we get is discounted. None of the information, let me make that clear, none of the information the banks get is discounted in the appraisal process.
Okay, thank you.
What it's fed in, we're saying something about the business.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Allah, I think you have a comment you want to chime in here. I can see you.
Thanks, Prof. I think a point we need to actually clarify is that we are not suggesting that the banks or the financial institutions have a responsibility or the primary responsibility to build capacity. We are saying they could support in the process of capacity building. Of course, because it will serve their own interest on the longer term. And I take the point made by NDD that banks are commercial enterprises, and they of course render returns to their owners. And so nobody is asking banks to do charity. What we are saying is that they should find a way of supporting some of these SMEs in a way to help them grow so they can become bigger customers of theirs without discounting their regular accreditation process and all of that. That's the first correction I'd like to make. The second point was the point made by Mr. Ewans. He was referring to the challenge of determining the competencies of trainers, and that SMEDA is considering having an arrangement where trainers are certified who could participate in capacity building. First, I agree with him that there are lots of trainers out there. Many of them really may not even define what training is all about. But there is a danger in what SMEDA is trying to do, because I've seen it done elsewhere. A danger in which one government agency assigns to itself the responsibility of certifying people to do certain things. At the end of the day, they turn it into a revenue generation exercise, where then SMEDA then organize 2 weeks program for all trainers, give them certificate. The question is, those who are giving those certificates, how much training themselves have they done? What I would preach is that we have self-regulatory organs, bodies of trainers in a particular area coming together and setting regulations for themselves. And then SMEDA or whatever agency can partner with them to check to see that there is some quality control. Ultimately, also remember that the person who received training has the primary responsibility of assessing the quality of those who are given, because I'm going to pay for it. The training is not cheap. But if SMEDA is certifying trainer to do his own work, they can go ahead and do it. I have seen it done before. We should move away from this idea of government agency certifying things, and they give you a long 15 list of things to go and bring. At the end of the day, it becomes big bureaucracy. It doesn't serve the purpose it was meant to serve. So I would push for industry and self-regulation. Let me give you an example. In the banking sector, the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria has a whole arrangement for certifying trainers for that sector. That is self-regulation. Regulation made by persons who are operators in the business, and it's working very well. It took them a long time to get there, but of course they have a very very thorough system of accrediting trainers who could present themselves to train people in the banking sector. So I just wanted to make that point that capacity building is not just about banks, it's about all the other agencies who will be involved in order to ensure that these enterprises are placed in a position to access finance from the institutions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Nwamaka, you've been silent for the past few minutes now. Please, at any point in time, please chime in, because what we're talking about was against the backdrop of your presentation. And for those audience members out there asking about the slides, do not worry, we will get it to you. Do not worry. Please, Nwamaka, the floor is yours. You're on mute, by the way.
Bad habits. Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much. Very, very interesting contributions from Mr. Evans, Mr. Allo, and Ndidi Amaka. I'm learning as well. But what I wanted to add, and this is maybe to the banks, is, and maybe Ndidi Amaka can speak more about this, is this issue, and I understand banks is about, making, you have to make money, it's not a charity. But I wanted to find out, because, in dealing with the SMEs I deal with, what I find is that a lot of them complain about the rigor, what is expected of them. And like Mr. Evans highlighted, out of that 41 million we said, a lot of these organizations are micro, okay? And therefore the categories of, assessing them cannot be the same with SMEs or even with more established organizations. And so, in feedback I get sometimes when they go for loans, even if they have the capacity building, they will ask them for collateral, interest rates end up being too high, so these are things that, I want to ask, the banking system, is there nothing that can be done in terms of really looking into this space? Because this figure is only going to grow, and that's going to become a huge market and a huge income to all sectors, including the banks. So is there nothing that can be done that can really simplify this to meet even the micro, 41.5 million micro out of that staggering number of MSMEs is huge. And a lot of these people cannot get money through banks. They have to go to other means. So I don't know if Ndidi can just throw some light on that. I know I'm not the moderator, but that is something. I hope you don't mind, Professor Joseph.
Wow. Amaka, I thought you just fired me for a second, but it's okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, because that's something that maybe the people listening are in that space of micro. And
Of course.
They're speaking behind the scenes.
I agree with you 100%. Ndidi, your reaction, please.
Okay. So, Wamaka, thank you. Very interesting. Let me make one thing. Banks are a profit-making entity. I hear you. I've said that.
However, we operate in a country, and that means we also have a social responsibility. We owe it to the different communities where we operate to make their lives better, including, and one of the easiest ways to make their lives better really is to facilitate what they do and ensure that their own profit-making objectives or their growth objectives are attained. So I will not discount the fact that we have that responsibility. I hear you when you say 41 million. Now, if we look at the infrastructure,
I think you're frozen.
All over the country.
Okay.
Okay. So sorry about that. I'm on two systems now, and I'm trying to. So
whichever system you're not using, can you please mute that mic so it doesn't echo?
It's muted. It's muted now.
Okay.
So we have 6,000 branches approximately. That is insufficient to cater for the kind of thing in the MSME space and growing. So the traditional mode will not work anymore. SANEF is a mechanism brilliant from the central bank that is catching fire. It will be an avenue by which more lending will happen at the micro scale. So let me address some of the pertinent issues that you've raised. Interest rate is too high. One of the things that a lot realize is that your interest rate is largely informed by your inflation rate. That's the truth. So your inflation rate plus your risk factor is what gives you your interest rate. As long as it's not single digit, it's unrealistic to expect that you will find single digit financing. If not, the companies or the organizations are growing, but it's not real growth. In real terms, they are down the line, you will eventually realize when they are dead, what actually happened. That's why you see brilliant initiatives taken by the central bank for intervention funding, which is single digit rate incursions. Think, oh, money is being made. Money is not being made. It's in real terms is funding at a loss. So that is one of the things that we need to face up to. But I know that government is working hard to address inflation. As you see that the lending rate will also come down. That's one. Collateral is gradually being phased out for borrowings within a particular bracket. We have a product called business. Today, it is non-collateralized lending, it's cash flow lending. So it is running on data, the data that we see, which is why I spoke earlier to the need to inculcate in operations, which I think you spoke about, Wamaka, when you raised your issues. So that discipline has become more pertinent than ever before. For instance, we will look at the average MSME. It will who is buying from him? How often do they buy? What volumes? Where is he spending money? When we start to see that money is going to serve his personal needs, then it tells us, is this someone you want to be? Collateral is gradually being phased up of as confidence is building with the banks. So I think that it will get better and stronger as data is growing. Remember, I spoke to the aggregation of data, your tax identification number, your NIN. There's so many brilliant initiatives from the central bank. The man cannot borrow from one place and suddenly disappear. The credit registries are getting stronger. These are the social systems and structures, the courts. These will help the banks eventually be able to phase out the traditional modes of lending. So we are moving, we're gradually getting there. So our eyes are on it, Wamaka.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, Joseph, let me just say something, because what she said is very true, and I find this is the discipline of the SMEs. And I think from our space as trainers, as consultants, Dr. Allo, the SMEDing, I think what it is what the SMEs really need is a behavior change, because we're giving all this training, and I don't know how much of it they are taking away. Honestly, I've been on programs where I've done several programs, ESP, Women X, You Win, you know, and I'll be seeing the same people there, right? You know, on the same modules, just flowing because there's a grant here or there's a loan here, opportunity. And I'm thinking to myself that, it's like what you said, Professor Joseph, couldn't they have had a certificate to certify that I've been through this already and I'm going through it again? So the problem, therefore, is the implementation, right? So how can we include that as part of the model, where it's not just about capacity building, it's about how do you assess that there's been implementation? And this is what he's saying, that level she spoke about, the product, where the behavior, we need to see a behavior change in terms of, have you identified that, okay, even if I don't have a financial statement, my bookkeeping, you know, I am not mixing personal and private funds. So maybe we need to identify some critical things in at the bottom of that pyramid that we need to see them change before we can even advance them to other levels. So maybe that's, you know, something that one needs to look at and find out what are the critical behaviors we want to see. So it's not scattered and they think I did this and I went there and they asked for this. Okay. Those are my thoughts.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Okay.
Go ahead, Monday. You want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I wanted to come in.
Please, you respond.
Yeah,
respond.
Yeah. Thank you so much. In fact, I quite agree with Ndidi about non-collateralized lending right now, because it has already been implemented right now through COVID-19 fund. It was given without collateral. Even the MSMEs fund that is being done right now is being done without collateral. But they have this system of, they call it GIS, so that once you submit your BVN, you're tracked to even your grave, so to say. You must pay back that money so long as you have money anywhere in the banking system. And that's okay, so that people could get sensitized and be able to pay back loans, because it's very, very critical. Once you take money, you should be able to pay back. That's the essence. And then, of course, I quite appreciate Dr. Allo's concern about what we're doing to clean up the BDSP subsector. Of course, if you look at the law establishing SMEDAN, it's exactly section 8, subsection 8C, section 9, subsection 9C, gives us the power to certify BDSPs in this economy, so that we can clean up the system, because we know that a lot of people do not have the quality, do not have the experience to really deliver quality service, value for money for small businesses to be able to achieve what they need to achieve to grow their business. So what we're doing is in line with our statutory obligation. So, and we're saying that even at the end of the day, we're looking at the end of the tunnel, that once we have a sizable number of certified and accredited institutions, then they can go to the next level of having maybe a chartered institute to be able to carry on that assignment. So, but we need to start something, because if we leave it vague, who will start it? Nobody is ready to do that. So we need to start it. At the end of the day, when we have a sizable number, then they can charter the institute and then take it off from there. That's where we're going. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your contributions so far. I want to take this time now to kind of recapitulate what the respective panel members have kind of broadly discussed, and then we'll leave it open for a few more questions, even though I've been taking questions along the way, but we'll leave it open for a few more questions so we can end this discourse at an appropriate time. So broadly speaking now, our first speaker, Nwamaka, mentioned with her eloquent presentation, of course, 3 dimensions to capacity building at individual level, organization, and of course, an enabling environment. And she also emphasized the need for, is that a one-size-fits-all training? You can't co-locate a large enterprise with the medium enterprise and a micro business all in one and expect them to get the same outcome. That cannot work. Dr. Allah went down to 3 levels. He mentioned financial institutions need the capacity, also further talked about the entrepreneurs and development partners and regulators. In that area, he mentioned entrepreneurs need more capacity to actually understand the various aspects of their businesses and the industry in which they operate in. The regulators have played an immense role in providing funds and enabling funds to go to certain MSME players. Nevertheless, development partners also come in and provided some adequate training. Meanwhile, Ndidi came in from the bank's perspective and said, affirmative, that they've moved beyond the 5 C's of credit. The collateral is the last aspect, and they're looking for character, looking for the individual's ability to defend a viable business plan, and so on to see what they've actually done in the first place. She also mentioned banks are actually caught between the short and long-term views of their respective businesses. That's why you have a situation whereby funds are disbursed in 1 year or in some instances 5 years. And also, she also mentioned the fact that her bank in particular has gone beyond just looking at the respective business plans. It's data-driven information from the credit seekers. They have specialist desks to aid the MSMEs and so on. And she went as far as saying the fashion fair that have started in helping co-locate respective MSMEs so they can share ideas and grow collectively. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Owens eloquently described Smith-End's role in the MSME space, dissecting the statistics provided by Nwamaka, and emphasized at advocacy, training, and even going as far as registering businesses at corporate affairs commission and so on, and facilitating access to credit. Now, having said that now, I've kind of broadly summarized some of the big ticket items which the panel members eloquently discussed. But without further delay, I just want to ask a few more questions because I see lots of participants blowing up my feed right now and asking me questions to put out there. So given that this is a COVID-19 era, my good folks on the panel, Abayomi Omiwale, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but this gentleman said, how can MSMEs have a well-structured organization and still allow their staff to work remotely? We're in a COVID-19 era, please. I'll give it to anyone who would like to respond to field this question.
Take the question again.
The question is straightforward. How can MSMEs have a well-structured organization and still have their staff work remotely? Trust me, this is a challenging question. Dr. Allah, before you respond, I'd like to point you to a study that came out from JP Morgan. Jamie Dimon, the CEO, actually said that productivity went down on Mondays and Fridays at JP Morgan, and he's looking for ways to recall their staff back to the office. Please, sir, unpack that.
I think Abayomi asked the question, needs to understand when we say a business is well structured.
Structured, perfect.
Structure is not about the building in which you stay. It is about having a framework for organizing the different activities in a manner that assists you to achieve your objectives. In other terms, you call it organizational structure. It has to do with the structure of governance. It has to do with the structure of management, and it has to do with the structure of handling your operations. So when we say a company should be well structured, for instance, for an SME, you are saying you must have a way of documenting your operations, the financial transactions. You must have a way of accounting for the inflow and outflow of funds. You must have a way of recruiting your staff, training them. It's a structure. In other words, you have systems in place, you have procedures in place, so that you don't just wake up one day and do it this way, another way, another day. So when we say structure, we mean run your business in a manner that allows for third parties to take a look at it and make a comment on how well you are doing it. Now, working remotely is a different thing entirely. It's about what has been imposed upon us by COVID, in which case your staff need not come to a central location called your office. They can stay in their homes and do their operations, do their activities, and through technology, you can coordinate and still serve your customer. So they're not opposing things at all. You may have a structure, proper structure for doing things, at the same time work remotely. And structure is not about the head office or the building in which your office is located.
Thank you for that response. Wamaka, do you want to add to that, or is the response accepted?
Well, I can add to that. I think what it is, and because I am in the talent management space, I've had this issue for a while. When I've dealt with small businesses or medium-sized businesses or whatever, I've always said that, the 9-to-5 culture, depending on the business you do, of course, when you're not customer critical, the 9-to-5 culture had gone a long time ago, and it was removing that mindset from people that whoever doesn't need to be in the office and can perform at home, we should get into that balance. But we and I know this is going to be short at, but I have adopted that culture a long time ago that wherever you can perform, if you can perform better at home and give me the KPIs, the results I need, fantastic, I don't need you here, right? And so what it needs, there's no structure around that. So the structure they have already is just for that working, I can see you. And you must remember, there's a lot of eye service going on where even in the office, that 9-to-5, it's not even saying they're effective. It's just that you see people moving around and you think they're doing something, not necessarily. And so we need to also get into the culture of helping them draft out goals, clear goals. This is your deliverables. And this, everything happened all of a sudden. So everyone was forced into this lockdown. So people have to have a structure for working at home because it's not going to go away. And the sooner we adapt a structure, that will be better. Now, the other issue we face is the infrastructure. So even from working at home, especially in Nigeria, we know the challenges already. You're running your generator, and that's what allows people to work in the office. Now, going home, your staff are not going to be able to run their generator. They're not going to be able to have the data. So if you're not providing these things, it's going to be a problem. And that's an additional cost. So I can understand the MSME that is raising this, because what they're saying is that I know these things might be required, but I can't afford it. But the truth of the matter is, it's not going to go away. If this is going to be a situation that goes on, we really have to identify our core staff. Remember, it's not all the staff that are critical to this working from home. There are some people you need the results from, so you have to equip those people to function from home. However, you need to do that. And I think
okay, that's perfectly fine. And did you have a question directed to you, actually? And this comes from an anonymous audience member. And this individual has said plainly, I am a startup. I'm a startup. I have the requisite education. I've gone through training, but I'm a startup. Given the interest rates, how do you expect a startup as myself to actually make it beyond the first 2 years if they were so inclined to actually get a loan? How do you react to that? Because I know you.
I already said.
Go ahead.
Go on.
So because you initially said. Go ahead.
I'm listening.
No, please go ahead.
So initially I said something. When you are a startup, your funding source should be equity, which is your own money or money from friends, family, interest lending. Because even the pressure that interest puts on you, it begins to stifle you in certain respects. That's the truth. So there is funding misalignment when you fund a startup with an interest rate loan. So you must make your best effort to first borrowing, which is preferably equity. Now, having said that, I think a lot of times what the visionaries are struggling with is they have this great and fantastic vision they're trying to sell, and more often than not, they're impatient about arriving at that vision. So you tend to think, oh, if only I could just get 7 million. If you got that 7 million, to kill the vision. So if what you can get is 2 million, then you have to find a way to execute that vision from very small stages and be patient enough to. One of the most beautiful things about startups is if you are patient, the business actually teaches you, it coaches you, you learn and you grow with the business, and that way you build a more resilient structure. It's a huge factor. Interest rate lending is definitely not the way to go if you're a startup. So you have to try and push it away. And when you're a bit stable, start to scale. Don't scale before you're stable.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question directed to Mr. Monday Ewans. It's more of a process question, really, because you mentioned something about the SMIDN registration or unique number. So they want to know, after you get that number, what's next? Can you walk us through the process? What does that number mean to the respective applicant, as the case may be?
Okay. Can I
Please
go ahead, please?
Yes, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, all right. The MSMEs Mass Registration Project has its own benefits, apart from helping the agency to maintain accurate and credible database for MSMEs in Nigeria. For the small businesses, we have several programs that can benefit small businesses who are registered. Of course, once you pass through the registration process, at the end of the day, an automatic certificate is given to you incorporating your unique SMIDN number. Of course, once you register, there are several things we are doing right now. For instance, there's what we call the Conditional Grant Scheme for Micro Enterprises, which gives capacity building, micro insurance, registration, and all that. And then at the end of the day, a grant of 50,000 naira is given to the beneficiary. And of course, if you're not registered, you cannot have access to that kind of benefit. Number two, we do capacity building as part of our annual statutory obligation. If you're not registered, you cannot be a beneficiary to that. And of course, we have also what we call One Local Government, One Product program, which is also targeted at supporting small businesses with equipment, workspace, working capital, and all that, and a small form of working capital in terms of grant. If you're not registered, you can't have access to it. Of course, you might recall that the federal government is also implementing the National Economic Sustainability Plan, which includes the one that have already launched, the MSME Survival Fund, and then guaranteed offtake. Of course, we are working with the office of the Vice President, who is rolling out this program, that for you to also be a beneficiary, you also need to be captured on that MSME registration platform, so that we know exactly who you are, where you're operating from, the kind of business, and other characteristics, so that once we are giving you this relief, we're able to know this is the person we are giving to, and we're able to follow up effectively to ensure that the impact is the one that we desired, and the impact is what we want for the economy. Because once we do that, we're able to create jobs, create wealth, and alleviate poverty in the society. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. So a lot of the questions that is coming around my way is actually directed to the DBN and how can MSMEs access funds from DBN. To be clear, Development Bank of Nigeria is a wholesale financial institution, which means we pass funds through PFIs, or participating financial institutions. That's commercial banks, microfinance banks, and other institutions to get to the ultimate beneficiaries, that is the MSMEs. So consequently, for you to access funds, you just have to look at the respective PFIs who have partnered with the DBN to access credit, and you meet those credit conditions. So hopefully that trashes out a lot of the questions coming directed towards the DBN. I don't want to keep on dwelling on the capacity building bit any further, but I would like to leave the floor open to our distinguished panelists with any final thoughts or final words so you want to provide to us and the audience members listening right now. We have reached the conclusion, if you will, of our webinar, and I would like each and every one of you guys to give your final words, final thoughts, so you can guide the participants as well as audience members who are in the MSME right now. I'll give the floor open to Wamaka, please. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just share a slide again, just very quickly. It's not going to be long. Okay, and this is just to round up for the audience, just some key insights. There are many funding streams, and this slide will be given to you. But I noticed that a lot of times what they want to know is where are they? And so like Professor Joseph said, and I hope he will supply, the list of contacts so that they can go through that level. But again, from that, and I'll advise you to read that survey report from PwC because it's very, very, very good. And I got this information there. So grants and funds available, low interest rate, single digit from the federal government initiative, applications through SMIDN, and then the Great Guarantee Scheme by Central Bank, another 2 billion naira. Again, read up on that. And these are just opportunities because it's important to know that, like Ndidi Amaka said, there are different levels, and startup, don't go to where SMEs are already prepared. You're not prepared for certain levels. So as a startup, you're an accelerator, you're looking for accelerator, incubator. So find out more about that because you're going to get more information there. And finally, just key lessons. Have a development implementation plan for things, and when you go for this capacity building, it's important you find out what is critical that I develop. If you give me a priority list, what are the top things I must get, I must sort out first before I move on. That might help you know what to prepare yourself. Then having a business continuity plan to work remotely effectively is very critical. Financial records, like we said, the basics, no mixing your personal with private is very key because even if you don't have the records, the bank, the first thing they look like is your behavior. How have you been the past months with how you behave with your own record keeping? Sorry about that. And the structure is very critical. You can't grow unless you got a structure. So you need to remove yourself as a one-man business and start looking at how you can delegate and put in more processes. And then funding. You need to understand the different types of funds and therefore decide the right loan for you. Like Ndidi Amaka said, some loans are not applicable for you. And a lot of these capacity buildings try and find out which loan do I need at this time? Is it family? Is it debt? Is it grant? Is it private equity? Whatever it is. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And those are my final thoughts.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Ndidi.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you. My final words will be around the future. The future of lending for MSME is going to be technology driven. Technology is feeding off on data algorithms. You have to be mindful what your numbers are saying about you. It's not just your profits that are speaking. It is the flow of your funds, where they come from, where they go to. If you're have to be mindful about the credit history that you're already establishing. If you have a bad loan, it's a great time to clean it up. All of the aggregation of this data is going to stand in the way to greater and greater funding. Technology is the future of banking, and the future is already now. So you need to go back, visit what your data is saying about you, clean up how you're doing your bank, clean up every negative that's in the past, and then steady for the future. because there will be very little human interface. Thank you.
Well said, Ndidi. Dr. Allah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Prof. I have 2 points as my final thoughts. The first one, I think there is a need for better coordination around efforts to support SMEs. We recognize how important that sector is. We recognize the huge gap that has to be filled. But our cause is not going to be helped if a plethora of institutions are launching a plethora of programs. You have CBN, you have SMEDA, you have Board of Industry, you have BBN, and sometimes some of these programs they contradict themselves in terms of the arrangement and the framework within them. So I would like to see better coordination. If you are attacking a problem, you have to do so in a properly coordinated effort. Everybody today is latching on to the SME space. For us to make impact and for us to ensure that we're not contradicting ourselves without knowing it, we need to coordinate better. The second point I think we need to emphasize, I'd like to leave behind, is this issue of financial literacy. That you have a PhD in whatever does not mean you are financially literate. The mistake people often make is that because they went to university, so they know the issues of money and finance. There needs to be more effort around that. The point Amaka made about knowing the difference between equity and the capital itself. In other words, it's not every time you go to a bank. And people don't even understand that many of our banks are only structured to provide the working capital, short-term fund to do things. So you cannot want to build a shop and go to a bank and you want to use the money to build a shop. How does the bank get its money back? So all of these issues of record keeping, issues of transparency, issue of having some other persons who are not owners of the business assisting you, advisors, financial advisors, consultants, and all of that. These are things I think we need to emphasize. So those are the 2 points I think I want to leave behind in terms of concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your input here. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Ewans, Monday, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. In fact, I like the point Dr. Allah made, the issue of coordination. We realize that coordination is very, very key in terms of supporting the MSMEs in a very coordinated manner. Of course, that is why we have the National Council on MSMEs, Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises, which is headed by the President. And all these institutions, key institutions of government, and even part of the private sector are members of this council. And at that level, we discuss all the programs, all the initiatives, and make sure that it is harmonized to benefit the small businesses effectively. So coordination is key, and then SMEDA is the secretariat of that council. Of course, going forward, MSME should know that capacity building is key. Of course, from my experience, some capacity building does not lead to access to finance, because in some cases, some people will go through capacity building, effective capacity building, and find out that their problem is not even money, but what to know to manage their business effectively. So they've learned that over time. So capacity building does not lead to to access to finance, but for you to have the capacity to manage your business. And once you're able to manage it very well, you become profitable and sustainable. And of course, small businesses think that, capacity building is not key, that is a waste of money and so on and so forth. But I want to tell them that you need to sharpen the saw from time to time, because you cannot keep using the saw, whether it is blunt or not. So capacity building leads to sharpening the saw for you to really be in a position to drive your business to higher levels. And of course, finally, the issue of startups running straight to the banks for formal lending. No, it cannot work because they don't have experience, they don't have capacity, and so on and so forth. From my own standpoint, a startup is supposed to learn the ropes before going to the banks to borrow money, have a kind of experience, you have records to show. So, which means, just like Ndidi said, for you to be a startup to start a business, your source of funding should be from your own savings, from your friends and family, people who know you already. that will be able to take a risk on you because you're highly risky. You don't have a track record. Nobody knows you. So that's where you're going to start. And of course, in business, there's also the risk of failing. If you're able to fail at that level with your own funds and family and friends funds, then nobody will kill you. They will just advise you and then move on. But if you borrow money from the bank and you tell them you have failed, man, you're done for it. They must come after you and you must pay back that money. So definitely do capacity building and don't go to the banks when you don't have the records, you don't have the capacity to pay back this money. Thank you so much.
Wow, what a dynamic panel. By way of final thoughts, I would like to thank each and every one of my panel members here for the wisdom and experience shared and inputs provided on an array of subjects, but principally around capacity building. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for donating your time. I really appreciate it, and the DBN family appreciates it as well. The participants, thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully this was not a waste of your time and you took away the central thrust of the concept we're trying to put out here. Capacity building as a tool for increased lending to the MSME space. Thank you all once again. I wish you all a very productive day. Stay safe out there. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.